見えた。
What's up, y'all? Phantom here, and in this video we'll go over the basics of offense and why it works the way it works, offensive tools like rebeats or character-specific moves, offensive playstyles, and how you can adapt your offense to your opponent's defensive choices. Lots of people have trouble incorporating their offense without much meaning behind it, so hopefully this guide will help you understand the entirety of offense. With that out of the way, let's get straight to it. Let's talk about why offense works the way it works. There are 5 main ways to open up someone with offense: frame traps, throws, throw baits, mix, and fatal shields. Frame traps are for when your opponent decides to act during a gap in your pressure, to which you cover their attempt with a frame trap and punish them for it. Frame traps work synonymously with pressure resets, which will make it hard for your opponent to determine if you're resetting pressure or presenting a frame trap, especially if they're too hasty to get out of pressure. Throw is a universal offensive tool that's completely unreactable, that requires your opponent to take the throw, tech the throw, or mash before the throw. Because of this immediate action required, this is one of the best ways to open up an opponent. Throw baits are simply faking the motion of a throw. Due to the unreactable nature of throws, throw baits are extremely strong and opponents can struggle to differentiate between a normal throw with a throw bait if all they're looking for is to tech the throw, which could lead to an open up. Mix is creating an ambiguous mix-up via left-rights, high-lows, overheads, and just general mix-ups to open the opponent outside of throw. Last is fatal shields, which is similar to thinking about how frame traps work. However, you must be ready to target it with either a standing mid to chip their shield, or a charge mid or overhead to punish their shield for massive damage. Throw works also. With the basics covered, let's begin to discuss and explain the offensive tools you could use in offense. Begin with the universal options that everyone has, starting with the movement options for offense. We have instant air dash, also known as IAD for short, which is used for a fast overhead. Different characters have different air dashes. For example, Shiki has a short arc air dash, while Roa has a horizontal air dash that allows them to get a quick double hitting overhead. But in general, IAD is very strong for its potential overhead mix-up, open up, and as a pressure reset. And it is especially important and very strong on beating low shields. It also acts as a low crash. Let's talk about jump next. In tandem with IAD, jump is a really strong option to present as its timing is completely different from a very quick IAD. Feared opponents may allow you to simply jump forward at them, worrying about the IAD. You can also combine the usage of jump and IAD to do jump delayed IADs, jump IAD triple overhead. There's a lot you could do with just a jump. You can also dodge a lot of Abari standing normals with just a simple jumping pressure, so it is strong to present to change up your timings. And now let's talk about rebeats. I want to just explain this in a live demo so I can explain this system better, and so I don't have to like cut every single time I chain normal or something. So I have a lot more freedom, but yeah, anyways, so on Melty, you can link any button in any direction, so with the only restriction that a button cannot be used twice in string. So you do strings like 5A, 5C, 5B, you do 2A, 2B, 5A, you do 5B, 5A, 5C. There's a lot you can do to string up, a lot of variety you could do, which what makes multi really cool in terms of offense. An important thing to know for rebeats is that you could enter a string with 5C or 2C and have your 5A whiff after. So for example, you do something like this specifically, the pressure reset, and you have all your buttons back. And you're also -1. However, do look at the wiki for your character and check the frame data on your repeats. But yeah, there's so much variety you can do for your strings. For example, you can end on a B button for spacing, like this. You can also do like something like this, change it up. You can also have your 5A width like I mentioned before as a pressure reset, so like this, something like this. You're -1 there, or depending on your character, you might be -1, you may be more minus than others, but for the most part, you're -1. There's just so much things you could do with your string. You could also do something what I call advancement, which is when your 5A hits on block instead of it whiffing, so something like this. Instead of a whiff like that, and since it hits on block, you get all your buttons back, so like this. You do a lot of variety with doing 5A on block. And more in depth of this rebeat usage will be explained in the playstyle and application section, but just know that rebeats are incredibly important in offense and should never be overlooked. Now let's talk about charge mids, overheads, and unblockables. So this is all pretty self-explanatory, so some different characters may or may not have a charge mid or charge overhead, but it is an important tool to use if you do happen to have one. A fairly universal mix-up using these charge overheads and blockables is doing a partial charge, where you only partially charge and hit them low for a mix-up. So finally, let's talk about plus frame and RPS specials. Some characters have plus frame specials, like Miyako's Stomp, or just a unique special in general to continue pressure, like Tohno's Slide. Usually these are not gapless, and it is shieldable. However, usage as also a frame trap and the mental stack for the opponent to be ready here is quite good. Now that we went all over the tools, it's time to go in depth with how to use each tool, especially in certain playstyles and how to use them properly. This will definitely be the most important section, so do pay attention. Basic strike throw. The most basic, one of the strongest, yet the most overlooked offense. Throws are still one of the best ways to open up an opponent, as they're completely unreactable and force a response from the opponent. While there is risk reward for both parties in that interaction, the one on offense typically has the upper hand due to the conditioning done to your opponent to force them into certain options. Before you think about any type of offensive style, you always want to have some sort of strike throw as your foundation, and it will matter. Let's discuss how strong it really is by demonstrating the guessing points in a basic layer of strike throw. After any Oki, do a meaty throw. After any button, do a tick throw. After any button sequence, whether it be like a 2A, 2A, just run up throw again. Running up throw, you can always run up button, in which you can do another tech throw, or present another stagger, and this repeats. The fast and forceful nature of strike throw is incredibly strong, and yet it remains one of the most overlooked types of offense. Staggers is quite literally also a part of strike throw. However, you can also play it in a way that to force some sort of reaction besides staggering to be the throw tech. Think about it this way. Assuming you're willing to take the throw, if someone is slowly doing a string at like extremely slow speeds, you'll certainly feel the need to either shield or lash out at some point. This sort of ideology plays an important part in another style. I'll keep it simple for now, I'll cover it later, but certainly keep it food for thought. Most Rekka characters will also take advantage of staggers like this. Let's show an example. For this example, Saber, a Rekka character, is doing Rekka staggers so slow that it can be blended in with yet another Rekka starter again. In the opponent's eyes, they're thinking, I must stop them from hard cancelling like that, in which the Saber just decides to do a slow Rekka follow-up and counter hit them. Saber could also IED at a random point instead to target low shields. Slow staggering to 5B, 5C is also a really strong way to stagger like this. Remember, you could also throw again. With staggers, you can certainly be wrong at some points. However, opponent may also be too scared to try to guess a certain stagger from you. But once again, keep the idea in mind, the incentive to act. It's time to begin basic rebeat offense. Rebeats, particularly rebeat whiffs, are probably the most used type of offense in Lumina. yet it is also very common for it to be used just for the sake of doing it, instead of giving it meaning, or reusing it as a game plan. Once again, remember to have strike throw as your foundation to everything. So now I'll just show a very basic game plan, and this is a truly basic game plan. We'll start leveling up our Rebeats later. We'll start with Rebeat into button, which is the most common thing to do after a Rebeat whiff. This will of course reset pressure and beat late and slow responses to your Rebeat. Next thing is frame trapping before the potential Rebeat whiff, with delayed buttons and specials. If you're doing multiple Rebeats, then eventually the opponent will have to lash out at some point. Remember, the incentive to act. So by introducing a delayed special or button, you'll frame trap them here. Next is Rebeat IED, which is also a very common pressure reset most people do. It's a strong way to beat low shield and low match attempts. However, do not overly rely on IED. It is super common to overly rely on IED so much that your pressure becomes way too linear and exploitable. It's nice to represent every once in a while, but again, try not to overuse it. Next is Rebeat Jump, which is similar to IED with the main difference of different timings and unique jump in pressure in combination with IED. You could do things like delayed IED, IED jump, jump button IED, jump jump if you really wanted to. A lot of ways to mix it up if your opponent is too scared to retaliate. Last thing is Rebeat Run Up. If your opponent is respecting too much, you could always hard reset by running up. Remember what I told you before, the incentive to act. The opponent is visually seeing you cancel Rebeat into a run, which is heavily minus. So the more you start doing that, the more they'll feel a need to lash out on the next Rebeat the next time, in which you can take advantage of the frame traps and delay responses to beat it. Now that we have covered fairly most of the basic game plans and playstyles, it's time we improve on it. And we'll finally also explain the art of advancement. Let's turn it up. Before we talk about more advanced styles, let's revisit this concept, the incentive to act. At this point, with the amount of time I told you about this concept, you probably already know what it means. But I'll explain a lot more in depth here. This isn't really a playstyle, but more of a conceptual thing to take note of when going through all of offense. So let's examine this Oki. The Roa has a safe jump, and most people already know this. But then Roa decides not even to jump cancel, and does a run up throw. In the opponent's eyes, they're just like, what the heck is he doing? I need to stop him from doing this seemingly fake Oki. Let's examine the situation again. The row is spaced, so DP and mash would be committal, as the row is not close enough until the run-up occurs. But he could also just not run up at all and do nothing. Then once again, in their mind, they must stop the Roa from doing this. So now they're conflicted and trying to deal with it or ignore it. However, the desire to act will almost always prevail here, so they know for certain that they must stop this seemingly bad and fake Oki from happening. By the way, this Oki is pretty strong, so people should do this. Let's look at another example. The Wark is doing 5A staggers, but eventually decides to just slowly walk up in 5A again. This is actually pretty strong against opponents that respect pressure, because the moment they try to react in the walk up and mash, they're probably already got counter hit. Idea here is again, the incentive to act. The Wark is seemingly doing fake pressure, so the opponent is incentivized to stop them here. Most people, even if they aren't really a gambling person on defense, will almost always have a certain trigger for them to act. These demos shown here are great examples of that, and it is important to have that thought in mind when incorporating your offense. Find the reasons opponents may mash out of something. I previously showed a basic Rebeat game plan. We're going to level it up because it was honestly way too linear. Remember, Rebeats could go in any direction. It doesn't just have to be 5C, 5A whiff all the time. Ending in B or even C buttons, depending on your character, is really strong, and is something not a lot of people do. It throws off the usual Rebeat timings, and is a unique way to reset pressure. Another thing you should do by ending a string like this is labbing out the spacing. My most favorite thing to do in offense is outspacing buttons with just a simple B or C ender. A lot of characters can do this, and it is incredibly strong due to its uniqueness. Remember, the incentive to mash. A respectful opponent may be inclined to mash an opponent ending in a stream with the minus button ender. The opponent either has to commit to their C button, which may be a risk for the defender if the opponent on offense is mixing spacing traps and fast rebeat pressure. Even then, some out-spacing setups even has 2 Cs with. Remember, lab out these spacings. Transitioning from outspacing, let's talk about the art of doing nothing. Yes, doing nothing. Once again, everything connects to the incentive to act, and doing nothing gives an opponent a reason to act. But the benefit of doing nothing specifically is actually really strong against certain players. Remember the run of Oki I mentioned before? The person running the Oki could always do nothing and be spaced and just watch the opponent like a hawk for whatever they throw out. In combination with outspacing, which you should already be doing nothing actually anyways, you'll be doing the exact same thing here. Depending on your spacing, your opponent may have to run up and commit to something, or try to jump out or ID at you. When offense will simply stare at them and wait for an option. Most awaited section, my favorite offense, the ultimate offense, the art of advancement. Advancement is quite literally a combination of every single style and concept I've mentioned here. I want to preface this before I continue. The art of advancement is not just someone doing a lariat or someone just running at someone in neutral. It is only related to rebeat advancement. My term, my rules, okay? So what is advancement? It is simply when instead of having your 2A or 5A whiff for rebeat, you do it on block. And depending on your character, it may allow for an infinite string that results you in being 5A range. And this single difference is absolutely game changing. While on rebeat whiff you get all your buttons back for a string, a rebeat on block will have your string continue, so you can still continue to frame trap with buttons instead of RPSing on the -1. Let's demonstrate a sequence. I once again will do a live demo since it will be a very long explanation. Fortunately, since I'm still masterful in my craft, I love advancing. I don't need a script. So let's begin. So let's start off with how to get the initial advancement. So first you want to see how your character's buttons move you forward. So in Roa's case, 5cc moves him forward and 2cc moves him pretty much forward. If you don't have any good buttons for it, try charge normals. So let's go to Akiha really quick. So as you can see with Akiha, there is a little bit of advancement, but eventually you can see it's not really infinite. Well, she does have a charge normal, which is her 5B, and you know what? If it advances, it advances. Anyway, let's go back to Roa now. So if you really want to know how your character advances, you should totally check out my Advancing Champions tier list video for your quote-unquote in-depth advancement. So yeah, anyways, once you learn how your character advances, it's time to demonstrate the power of advancing. It's going to be a long sequence of events and reasoning, so be ready. Remember when we talked about strike throw? Well, it is the start of everything. So you want to start with the potential threat of strike throw. Like with all pressure, start with 5A or 2A. And you already have a strike throw threat. And it's already pretty strong. Strike throw is already strong. Strike throw is always pretty good. Anyways, so once you get that potential threat going, you could also stagger the 2A as well. You want to start going into your advancement, in which is also part of your stagger too. So like, or I guess 2C is better here for Roa. Advances. That's your advancement right there. You can also stagger the 2cc in a way to frame trap as well, so dual purpose. But anyways, once you get your advancement, bam. you get second chance of strike throw. A single strike throw attempt? Or a throw attempt, tech throw attempt actually. That's one. Second chance with this. Just like this. That's your second chance. And this 5A is like so strong. But there's a lot more than just that tech throw. You have multiple routes after landing this 5A. So, for one, you got tech throw. Very strong. You're really close. Throw is a big threat here. Two, if you want to reset pressure again, you could always just do a run up button. Or you could do something, you could do a hard cancel. It looks super seamless, as you can see here. What I'm doing is pressing 5A and waiting for the, I guess the internal timer for it to like end so I could string again and still have all my buttons. So it looks like it looks like an infinite string, but I'm like waiting for a split second. I also have rapid beat off, on with A plus B. So yeah. Next is IAD, which is actually pretty good here. Since this is such a common mashing point for the opponent after this 5A because you're so close to throw again, they might mash here or low shield here. So IAD is really strong. So like this. Pretty good. And then last but not least, you got Frametrap. So I guess we could do this. Something like that. But after Frametrapping, there's still so much more you can do. Although you no longer have an A button to Rebeat whiff into, this is where your button ender comes in. Choose your button ender of choice, and because of how the string is set, you may be knocked back a fair distance. I call this retreating. Yes, more terms, I know. And it should be a good space to outspace some options, so let's show an example. So before we show the button ender as a way to Frametrap, let's do it after instead of not a Frametrap, but as a foot seize tool. So like that. Oops. See? The spacing you're set in is pretty good to dodge a lot of Abari 2Bs. But again, test your character's strings and see how you could outspace like that. They may be more inclined to start mashing you at this point of your retreating. So like if they see you do this a lot, doing this a lot, like although they're 2B whiffs, like I showed before, okay, 2B whiffs right there. They might start doing different options for them to hit you out of the outspacing thing. They might do 2C. 2C's definitely gonna hit me here, like that. See, or ID or whatever option they choose to do, like a run up button or something. So for that, remember you still got buttons to Frametrap with too, so you could always do something like this. You still got buttons, but now after this point, you'll be running out of buttons. Like you have your 2A, you use up your advancement, you burn your 5A so you can't rebeat whiff, and then you burn your button under, and then now all you have left is your remaining buttons. So then now, depending on your character, you want to end your string. So for Roa, well, you know he can't end his string. You could loop it. So you can keep going, but for whatever your character is, whatever ender or loop or special, whatever you have, do that as your ender. But yeah, that's basically it. The advancement sequence. You can see in the latter half that you may be low on options after the advancement. Like say you're running out, you can't really rebeat whiff. But the juice of the advancement is in the beginning. That's where you loop, right here. That's where you loop, and since it's the beginning, it's easy to loop, and you start the threat early. So for demonstration purposes, because Roa is kind of broken with the strings, let's go back to Akiha again, because she doesn't have the best strings for. I mean, she is a looper. She is a looper. Anyways, same ideology again. Find whatever advances, or 5C. See if you can get that advancement in. So now, we gotta tech throw situation. Oops. And now, if you want to frame trap with button or button under, 2B I think is pretty good here. I believe is 2B or her 2B makes Tohno 2B. Let's see here. Yeah, look at that. Look at that. You gotta lab that out for yourself. But yeah, so that's a button under. Oops, turn it off. And then out of buttons, ender. Do it all again. And that's advancement. So just for the heck of it, I'm gonna just show Tohno's advancing sequence. Because you know, Tohno's my main, I might as well show him what I do on offense. So again, with all advancing sequences, start with the 2A. Start your strike throw point. And after the 2A, you have 2 advancing normals, your 5B, 5C. 5B works, but 5C is a little bit better, but I could show both. Like, you could do something like this. Same thing. Oops. Same thing, but 5C is a little bit better. And then that's where your advancing starts. Want to reset? Tech throw, whatever. It's right there. Want to loop pressure? You could do this, what it looks like. If you want to loop pressure, if you want to frame trap, or use a button under, you have 5B still and 2B, so pretty good. You're -2. You actually dodge like Tohno's 2B with 5B. Almost. Like that. It's also just really good anyways. But you can also do. That's also really good. You could do 2B or 5B 2B, same thing. Like this. Or same thing. And then 2B is just broken as a button under. Because that on alone is gonna dodge like so many sweeps. Like that. And because you're -3, it's so seamless to just cancel or run up. It's really good button under. And speaking of button under, your string under is just slide. So slide. And yeah, that's Tohno's advancing sequence. Something I didn't show yet is the character-specific things to do for the advancement game plan. After 5A, instead of doing a button reset, you can opt to use your charge normal plus frames, or whatever is suitable special here. For example, CO can easily 5C after a 5A to easily crush low shields and mash, and get big damage. Similarly with Miyako, by using her 2-1 for A and B charge, you can use it for plus frames as well as covering for mash. Another fairly important thing when stringing like this, because the string may or may not be traditional for you, your combo routing on getting a hit may be weird, so you'll probably have to lab out the best confirms off those stray hits and advancing pressure. To wrap this all up, you don't strictly have to follow the advancing game plan. The game plan shown simply demonstrates the combination and creativity on how you can string up, and allows you to think about how to get the most mileage out of your buttons and strings. However, I will still firmly enforce the strength in getting that second 5A sequence and pressure, because again, it's a second reset point, and you're in tech throw range. You have so many options after it, so I highly recommend giving it a try in offense. Nearing the end, it is now time to put our knowledge of offense to the test. By now you'll probably already have your own preferred way to run offense. We all do, it's natural. However, it is important to be ready to use a different skill or style for our appropriate situations. Let's see how you can target defensive styles. The shield spammer. You probably already expected this. There's definitely going to be those type of players that simply do not care and will let that shield rip, even if it fails 5 times in a row. Now against someone spamming shield, you probably already know the answer, and by default, you'll probably think about IDing here. And that's correct. IED is usually a good answer to this. But if you look at all the other offensive styles that you could do, you'll find that staggering to eventually slow 5B, 5C, and doing nothing are also decent ways to deal with shield. Advancement is also incredibly strong, because you will most likely reset on a 5B, 5C for your infinite string. They'll continue to get chipped, and with advancement, you can always just throw here or IED as well. So now, good job, you dealt with the shield spammer. But alas, not everyone is just good at shield alone. And also, you'll never always be right, and you may guess wrong on shield. That is simply just life. Anyways, let's continue on. The Turtler. This is probably the easiest to autopilot against. Most people may just continue to string up, not realizing the opponent refuses to try to contest on the string. Now you can think of this situation in two ways. Guess what the first way is? The incentive to act. What will make the opponent bite eventually to your offense? And now the second way, and also something I never talked about. Switch it around. What makes your opponent not willing to bite? You need to realize these things immediately when you're pressuring someone. Find out why they aren't biting, and then find a way to force them to bite. The sooner, the better. So first, you need to find out why the opponent's not biting in the first place. In this case, they don't seem to care about the strings, so you need to immediately realize that and start the pressure early, and introduce some strike throw. Now you also need to account for the fact that they may or may not mind taking the throw, or otherwise will take the throw. You should quickly acknowledge it and introduce some throw baits as well. Inevitably, most people on defense will have the eventual trigger to act, so once you start giving them very quick and immediate guesses with throw, they may start getting hasty and present a volatile option. At this point, you already succeeded. You gave them fear. Inevitably, in all players, they'll eventually have a trigger to have the incentive to act. And this fear will probably carry on to the defensive habits soon if you're pressuring them rapidly. Here's a level up from the shield spammer, the Gambler. The opponent will not care and will quite literally select an option, whether it be DP, shield, heat, on wake up, every gap, every recovery. They might even just randomly stand shield to stop your slow staggers into your 5B, 5C. The single best answer is to be spaced and do nothing. Now this is certainly not applicable for for most characters. Being spaced and doing nothing will force them into an option outside the usual shield, dash, whatever they spam. In response to your do nothing, if they're still alive in there, IED, jump out, and run up button are all common responses to stop you from staring at them. Just be careful not to overuse the do nothing. You may start to overuse it, and it becomes way too linear, and they may realize this to take their turn back for free if you aren't ready. So make sure to be unpredictable. Make sure to still do your normal offense, while also introducing a couple of do nothings. The Smart Turtler. Here's what most people probably are. The Smart Turtler. They won't mind holding it for a while, and then they'll eventually randomly select an option, assuming you might get too comfortable on offense to be ready for a random option. But they also still might look out for options that may be easily targetable and act accordingly. Hence, the Smart Turtler. There's so many ways for them to turtle and eventually select, but you could easily adapt and play around these types of styles if you realize why they aren't biting and how you can get them to bite. You can do strike throw early, like I mentioned before, to have the guesses start early. You can do infinite advancement and see if they have an internal timer to lash out. You can also randomly present the option of doing nothing. They may bite there or on a gap that you happen to do nothing. They might DP during that gap. There's a lot you could do, and it's your job to realize what you need to do here to eventually activate that trigger to act. Be unpredictable with your options. Rotating styles will give them a difficulty in trying to find a proper response to your offense. Now there are probably way more defensive habits and also way better answers to some of these styles, but I really don't want to continue thinking about how people may act to something. It truly is a player by player thing, and also very player opinionated about how people see offense. And this video is entirely how I see offense, and I really hope that it helps. But again, this should help with your thought process in determining the situation better by using the right offense. Once again, it is totally fine to stick to a certain game plan and style. If you're comfortable and strong with it, then have at it. But it is important to adapt when the time is right. We've reached the epilogue. If you did watch to the end, I thank you for taking the time to watch this guide. I worked on this guide for 4 days straight, totaling 36 hours in those days. And I still have school. I'm so happy to finally complete this guide. After so many discontinued projects, I'm proud to say I finally completed a full project. I hope this guide really does help you get back on your feet to get better at offense. Of course, I'm only human. I may have forgotten some key details for offense, though I really hope the info I provided here will suffice. If you ever want any additional info or clarification, you can always DM me or at me in the PSA server. Again, thank you for sticking around, and I'll see you soon.